Atmanam evatmataya vijanatam. I'll try it again. Evatmataya vijanatam. Tenaiva jatam nikhilam aprapanchitam jnanena bhuyo api cha tat praliyate rajram aher Boga Bhavavao Yata Atmanam Evatmataya Vijanatam Tenaiva Jatam Nikalam Prapanchitam Jnanena bhuyopi chatat praliyate Rasjam maher bhoga bhava bhavao yata Atmanam evatmata ya vijanatam Tenaiva jatam nikalam prapanchitam Jnanena bhuyopi chatat praliyate Rajvam maher bhoga bhava bhavao yata Atmanam evatmataya vijanatam Tenaiva jatam nikalam prapanchitam Jnanena bhuyopi chatat praliyate Rajvam maher bhoga bhava bhavao yata Okay, anybody? Brave souls? No, the brave souls. Okay. Atmanam, yourself. Eva, indeed. Atmatya, as the Supreme Soul. Avijanatam, for those who do not understand. Tena, by that. Eva, alone. Jatam is generated. Nikilam, the entire. Prapanchatam, material existence. Jnanena, by knowledge. Bhuya api, once again. Cha, and tat, that material existence. Praliyate, disappears. Rajvam, within a rope. Ahe, of a snake. Bhoga, of the body. Bhava, abhava, the apparent appearance and disappearance. Yata, just as. The translation. A person who mistakes a rope for a snake becomes fearful, but he then gives up his fear upon realizing that the so-called snake does not exist. Similarly, for those who fail to recognize you as the supreme soul of all souls, the expansive, illusory, material existence arises, but knowledge of you at once causes it to subside. So you can repeat. A person who mistakes a rope for a snake becomes fearful, but he then gives up his fear upon realizing that the so-called snake does not exist. Similarly, for those who fail to recognize you as the supreme soul of all souls, the expansive, illusory, material existence arises, but knowledge of you at once causes it to subside. So purport by the servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada's servants. Those submerged in illusion see material existence as infinite, just as one who is submerged in water sees only water all around him. For example, material scientists and philosophers submerged deep within the ocean of material illusion imagine that material nature extends infinitely in all directions. In fact, the material creation is a finite ocean of ignorance in which foolish living entities such as material scientists are unceremoniously dunked by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's quite a poetic expression. To be trapped in a world in which all things are born and die is certainly a fearful experience. Anyone trapped in a dark place naturally becomes fearful. Since material life is always covered by the darkness of ignorance, every conditioned soul is fearful. The material nature is not ultimate reality, and thus analysis of matter can never provide answers to ultimate questions. This dark, snake-like existence called material life immediately disappears as soon as one opens his eyes to the bright light of Krishna consciousness. So again, Atmanamevatmataya vijanatam Tainaiva jatam nikalam prapanchitam Gyanena bhuyo pichatat praliyate Rajvam mahiroga bhavam nabhava. So, Om Ganatimiranda Shah Gananjana Shalakayat Chakshur Unmiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So here, of course, illusion is mentioned in this particular verse and purport. And illusion is defined in a very interesting way, is seeing something which exists, but as something else. In other words, the rope exists. And personalist philosophers or illusory philosophers or those who are simply thinking that nothing exists say that nothing exists. But we say that this material world does exist, but the perception of the material world, that is the illusion, or the perception that we have of the material world, that is the illusion. And what is that perception? The perception is that it is separate from Krishna. That's the material perception. So illusion is actually defined in the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're going to read a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam that is translated by Srila Prabhupada. It's from the 3rd canto, 20th chapter, text 18, that talks about the different types of ignorance. Because that's what illusion is. Illusion means to ignore the Supreme Personality of Godhead And anyway, not to see him behind the material creation. So, according to this verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Brahma created the different coverings of ignorance that we're all subjected to. And it's described here, there's 5 in number, and we're going to describe them. Tamishra, Anda Tamishra, Tamas, Moha, and Maha Moha. So these are the 5 types of illusion that we are subject to, and Prabhupada states in his purport that the conditioned souls or living entities that come to the material world to enjoy sense gratification are covered in the beginning by 5 different conditions. So the first covering is called Tamishra, and Prabhupada defines it here as anger. Anger, of course, in this particular context doesn't mean that one is, let's say, externally just seething, but it means that one is angry at the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate proprietor and the ultimate enjoyer. So our anger is actually focused on him, or envy. You know, we can say envy, anger. It's focused on him because we want what he has. We want what he has. And what does he have? He has everything. And we want everything. So that's Tamishra. And Prabhupada here says, constitutionally, each and every living entity has minute independence. It is a misuse of that minute independence for the conditioned soul that causes him to think that he can also enjoy like the Supreme Lord. So this is what I was just describing. Or to think, why shall I not be a free enjoyer like the Supreme Lord? This forgetfulness of his constitutional position is due to anger or envy. So here Prabhupada says exactly what I just said before. The living entity, being eternally a part and parcel servitor of the Supreme Lord, can never be by constitution an equal enjoyer with the Lord. When one forgets this, however, and tries to be one with him, this condition is called Tamishra. In other words, even if you're not thinking of Krishna, but if you're thinking you're the enjoyer, you're the proprietor, as the Bhagavad Gita states, Ishwaroham, aham bhogi, Siroham balavan sukhi, I am the controller. I mean, it's a really heavy illusion that we think we can control people, we can control the material energy. I'm going to give you an example in my own life, which is good to criticize myself, that when I was starting this temple here, we had a lot of trouble because it kept raining all the time. Much more than it's raining now. And we couldn't even move. We had half of a double-wide mobile home, basically, sitting here. It was set up for living, and the other half was in the driveway because we couldn't move it because it was too muddy. And I was starting to get angry. And at one point, I got so angry that I threw a stone in the air at Indra. You know, was cursing Indra. So, you know, in other words, this is Tamishra. You know, Tama, of course, means ignorance, Tamishra. That one is thinking they can control things. And certainly, when we get behind our computer, you know, we think we can control things. And what happens when things are not being controlled by us? We get really angry, even in our computer, which is an inanimate object. So this is actually Tamishra. And Prabhupada here says, even in the field, of spiritual realization, this Tamishra mentality of the living entity is hard to overcome. In other words, we're generally thinking we're the controller. You know, one's thinking, I'm the controller of this temple, I'm the controller of my life, I'm the controller of my body. I mean, we can't even control the body. I mean, we're subject to so many difficulties with this body and with things we love to control, right? Like to grow my hair back or something like that. I can't even do that. You know, some stupid little thing like growing hair. Can't even do. So, you know, so even spiritualists think like that. You know, I am the controller of my disciples, whatever. Of course, Krishna quickly teaches you this isn't the case. In trying to get out of the entanglement of material life, there are many who want to be one with the Supreme. Even in their transcendental activities, this lower grade mentality of Tamishra continues. Wow. And then, so that's something that I think we're all subjected to. And then the next one is Anda Tamishra. Actually, Anda means like a blind well or a ditch. So Tamishra involves considering death to be the ultimate end. When it's all over, it's over. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. The atheists generally think that the body is the self, so most of us are not subject to this particular type of ignorance. The body is the self, and that everything is therefore ended with the end of the body. Thus, they want to enjoy material life as far as possible during the existence of the body. Their theory is, exactly as I said, as long as you live, you should live prosperously. Never mind whether you commit all kinds of so-called sins. And here Prabhupada says exactly what I said. You must eat sumptuously, beg, borrow, and steal. And if you think that by stealing and borrowing you are becoming entangled in sinful activities for which you will have to pay, then just forget that misconception. Because after death, everything is finished. No one is responsible for anything he does during his life. This atheistic conception of life is killing human civilization, for it is without knowledge of the continuation of eternal life. And actually, one interesting experience I had in a religious institution of this Anda Tamishra was that one time I was going to Sunday school, not in the Hare Krishna movement, but in the Jewish temple, Jewish church. And my teacher his father had just passed away. And he said, class, I just realized something. When you're dead, you're dead. There's nothing after death. And I was thinking, this is supposed to be a religious school. Why is he teaching atheism in a religious school? So, and then Prabhupada says this Anda Tamishra is due to tamas. Tamas means ignorance, or the mode of ignorance. The condition of not knowing anything about the spirit soul is called tamas. Tamas means complete ignorance. This material world is also generally called tamas because 99% of the living entities are ignorant of their identity as a soul. Almost everyone is thinking that he is this body. He has no information of the spirit soul. Guided by the misconception, one always thinks, this is my body, and anything in relationship with this body is mine. That's tamas. In tamas, you basically don't have a philosophy. You know, and Anda Tamishra, let me differentiate, you have a philosophy. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. You understand? But in tamas, pure tamas, there's no philosophy. It's just like, moment to moment, get drunk, it doesn't matter, etc. This is my body. Anything in relation, for such misguided living entities, sex life is the background of material existence. Actually, in the conditioned souls, in ignorance of the material world, are simply guided by sex life, and as soon as they get opportunity for sex life, they become attached to so-called home, motherland, children, wealth, and opulence. And here's the next ignorance. As these attachments increase, moha, or the illusion of the bodily concept of life, also increases. Moha basically means illusion. Thus the idea on this body and everything belonging to, in other words, moha is like the extension of tama. Tama is just like gross identification with the body. And then, at least in Andata Mishra, you have a philosophy. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. But in tama, it's just I'm the body. But in moha, which is the step further than tama, then everything related to this body is important. My race, of course that's a little bit farther extended, but at least my body, my home, my wife, my little children. That's called moha. And as the material world, this is so interesting, as this increases, the whole world is put into moha, sectarian societies. Like you see this now with racism, which is becoming more prominent in the United States. Or even this whole concept of prohibiting people from entering the country, immigration thing, which is becoming very prominent in the political field right now, where you want to erect this gigantic wall between us and another country. Can you imagine? I mean, and of course, in previous communist countries, they had gigantic walls to keep people from leaving. And, keeping people from coming, people who want to work or people who want to chant Hare Krishna, of course. This is actually moha, sectarian. Prabhupada says sectarian societies, families, and nationalities are created by this illusion of moha. And they fight with one another. Don't we see that? And maha moha is even worse. That's the final illusion, where one becomes mad after material enjoyment. In other words, maha means great illusion. As Prabhupada said, especially in this age of Kali, everyone is overwhelmed by the madness to accumulate paraphernalia for material enjoyment. You can blame Amazon for that one. And then Prabhupada quotes from the Vishnu Purana. He says, these definitions are very nicely given in the Vishnu Purana, where it is stated, let's see, Tamo vivekto mohasyad antakarana vibramaha maha mohas tu vigyeyo gramya boga sukhashana maranam yanda tamishram. It's basically saying the same thing. Anda tamishram is denial of death. Tamishram krota uchate. I can translate this. It's simple Sanskrit. Tamishram, which is the first one, krota is known as anger towards God or envy towards God. Avidya, pancha, paravaisha. These are the 5 types of avidya or ignorance. Pradur bhuta mahatmana. So one has to overcome them. So there's one point here. So it's important to be able to identify the reason these 5 types of ignorance are mentioned. Tamishra, Andatamishra, Atama, Moha, Mahamoha. Everybody should remember that. There's a lesson in ignorance for you. It's interesting. For me, it's very interesting. The 5 types of ignorance described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Tamishra, envy of God. Use the word envy instead of anger. Tamishra. And then Andatamishra, which is basically eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. Because you're envious of God. I want to be like Him, so I just want to. So these build upon one another, these 5 types of ignorance. In other words, it's just like the first point, because we come in the material world because we want to emulate God. I probably gave the example, which I've given many times before. It's like a little girl wants to emulate her mother. And she thinks, I want to cook. Okay. I want to be the cook. Why should you cook? And then the mother gets her a little play stove. And that's Tamishra. And then under Tamishra is basically, I'm gonna enjoy, eat, drink, and be merry, like that. And then Tama is just like, just pig out. And then you got Moha, which is basically the increase, pigging, when you pig out, sorry about that, using these expressions, when you're just really into the body, then you expand your illusion, that's Moha. Moha. You expand your illusion by things connected to the body. Like, initially, things like, of course, even before your family, your clothes, like, ladies are very attached to having different types of clothes. What was that I just saw? Anyway, so like Imelda Marcos, she had like so many different shoes and different sets of jewelry and earrings and things like that. And not just like men, men are attached to, they have their man toys. And they have in their house, they have their man cave. Man toys, man cave. And so that's expansion. And Moha, and then Mahamoha is where you just like go crazy about it and you start killing everybody about it and creating walls between one country and another. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, this whole thing, like immigration and everything, is just completely crazy. Because we're all parts and parcels of Christian. We're all sons of God. It's like kicking out some of your brothers or denying them their inheritance, which happens actually. It's like with this, anyway, Mexit. You know what Mexit is? No, you don't know what Mexit is. Anyway, it's when half of the royal family split recently. There's Brexit and Mexit. Anyway, so just like kicking them out or denying them their rights just because they happen to be different or look different or have a different colored skin or born in a different place. I mean, it's crazy. So that's Maham. Anyway, so that's Mahamoha. So now you all know we're all going to be tested on this illusion tomorrow, different types of illusion. Again, we'll go through them. Tamishra, Anda Tamishra, Tama, Moha, and Mahamoha. Everybody remembers? The 5 types of illusion. So you can actually identify with them which ones you're subject to at a particular time. The reason they're mentioned is so that we can actually be a little introspective and understand which type of illusion we're subject to. Then, there's another interesting verse that relates to this verse here. Like it's described, a person who mistakes a rope for a snake becomes fearful, but he gives up his fear upon realizing the so-called snake does not exist. So, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a very wonderful verse, which is in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which describes the illusion or the fear that one experiences because one is in illusion. A famous verse. It goes, Bhayam dvitiya bine veshatashat ishadapetasha vipariyosmati tanmayato buddha abhajetam bhakjayaka kayesham guru devat atma. So the translation is, fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant This bewildering, fearful condition is affected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, whom we should accept as his worshipable deity and his very life and soul. Actually, and here, in the purport, Prabhupada, I'm not going to read the purport, but Prabhupada quotes Srila Siddhar Swami, who says that fear is caused by ignorance. Of course, there's that famous statement, there's nothing to fear but fear itself, anyway. So it's ignorance, because really, what is there to fear? I mean, except we should be afraid of being in Maya, forgetting Krishna. But materially, what is there to fear? What's the worst thing can happen? You die. What's wrong with that? You get another set of bodies, a born body. It's like one changes his clothes. Just like when I was young, I was very much afraid that my mother would not return my laundry. Because it was old. My mother, I was very attached to my old clothes, with holes in them. Nowadays, of course, you pay money for clothes with holes in them. That's a little different. But in the old days, if you had clothes with holes in them, your mother wouldn't let you wear them anymore. Sometimes my mother would grab them from me and rip them off my body because I was so attached to them. But there's no problem. She'd always get me a new set of clothes. So in the same way, that if we're understanding that we're the soul different from the body, then what's there to be fearful of? Whatever happens. Therefore, a devotee is abhaya sattva samshuddhi, jnana yoga vavastitihi. That's from the Gita. The quality of a devotee is free from fear because he has this transcendental knowledge. So Prabhupada said, fear can be dispelled by knowledge and by worship of the Supreme Lord. Anyway, so this is the quote from Prabhupada. So in other words, we're dealing with two different problems here: ignorance, different types of ignorance, and fear. And the way to overcome that is to basically understand Krishna is everywhere, controlling everything. Ishavasham idam sarvam yakancha jagajam jagat tena chakchena bhunjira magrata kashishvidyanam. Krishna owns everything. He's the controller of everything. He's the enjoyer of everything. And we are his eternal parts and parcels, his servants. And once we realize that, illusion dissipates. Krishna Surya Sam. Maya Haya Andakar. Krishna is like the sun. When there's the sun present, what? There's no darkness. Right? With darkness is simply the absence of light. It doesn't have any substantial existence itself. You can't say, bring me some darkness. Of course, when we were young, we had black lights, but that's a different thing. That's not dark light. It just caused certain things to luminesce. Like if you have a white dhoti, it'll appear purple under a black light. Just like. But, what's darkness? Darkness is simply absence of something. So you get rid of darkness by bringing light in. No problem. Like if we turn off the lights there, and it's the night, it'll be dark. But there's no such thing as darkness. So bring in Krishna. And then illusion is gone. Understanding that Krishna is Bhoktaram, Jagatapasam, Sarva Lokamaheshwaram, Suridam, Sarvabhutanam, Gyatwamam, Shantim Richati. He's the enjoyer. He's your friend, Bhoktaram. Bhoktaram means the enjoyer. Bhoktaram, Suridam, Sarvabhutanam. He's your friend. And in this way, you can really be Shanti, peaceful. Gyatwamam Shanti Richati. And Prabhupada, when he quoted this verse, 529 of the Gita, Prabhupada said this is the peace formula. In other words, not only peace in the world, but peace internally, freedom from fear, freedom from illusion. Then you're peaceful, then you're Shanti. Okay. So on that happy note, we got a minute and a half left for class. Any questions or comments? Purva, any questions? You missed the description of the 5 types of illusion, which is from the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Really interesting, you know. Tamishra, Onla Tamishra, and then Tama, Moha, and Mahamoha. 5 types of illusion. Everybody remembers them? Quite interesting. Okay, any questions? Yes. Well, everything comes from Krishna's illusory energy. But even, I mean, all illusion comes from Krishna's illusory energy. But Tamagun is the predominant, as Prabhupada said in the purport that we read, predominant mode in this material world. So even if one's in the mode of material goodness, there's still the influence of Tama there.
Is that Thomas?
Tama, yeah, Tama means illusion. But Tama itself, when we use Tama as one of the 5 types of illusion, it means simply just like not being aware of anything. Like being drunk. Or being completely absorbed in bodily satisfaction. Like Prabhupada described, you know, sex life is one of those things. And not even having a philosophy. You know, the Epicurean philosophy, you know, each one can be married, or Charvaka Muni. There's your wife saying, listen to me, Prabhu. So anyway, or Charvaka Muni who would say, beg, borrow, or steal, but get yourself some ghee. That Prabhupada, he's the Vedic version of Epicurus. Epicurus, of course, was a person who believed in eat, drink, and be merry. So we have our Charvaka in India.